My story does not involve cocaine. Sorry to disappoint you. um, when they asked me to do the show, I love storytelling, and there's one story that I always kind of jump to whenever I get the chance. It's my family's favorite story to tell anyone who will listen to us, Babylon. And it's a story that I think shows off why I think my dad was the greatest man that I've ever met. Which I know a lot of people say that about their dads, like, my dad raised me to be the man I am today. That's true, but I have proof. Before I get to the meat of the story, though, there's a little context just to kind of get through so we all know what's going on. The first piece of context is that me and my younger brother are the product of my dad's second marriage. I have 3 older brothers that come from his first marriage. My oldest brother, he's 13 years older than me, and my younger brother is 7 years younger than me. If you're doing the math, it's 20 years. 20 years of my dad having kids, 79 to 99, Carter to Clinton, kids the whole way. He's a busy guy over the course of 2 marriages. So that's the first bit of context, is who me and my brothers are. The second bit of context is that my dad is just a really good dad. What do I mean by that? Well, he went through a very, very messy divorce from his first wife. Very bitter, very angry, a lot of words thrown around. And during that messy divorce, my dad actually did a lot of research and read a lot of articles at the time about what children of divorce need to feel loved and attention and really get that relationship with their parents still intact during the divorce. And this is the 1980s. The bar for parenting was very low at the time, especially divorced parents. Like, your whole job, you get an A+ if they had shoes and didn't starve. That's all you needed. No one cared about emotional development at the time. My dad was 30 years ahead of that game. Very impressive stuff. Awesome dad. And the way he did this was, he was like, oh, they needed individual time and attention as well as group family time. Like, it wasn't just weekends with dad, the 3 of us would bond. It was, hey, you want to go to the Smithsonian? Let's get on a plane. Let's go. Individual trip. Oh, you want to go camping and fishing in a cabin? Let's book one right now. Let's go. Like, that individual, like, interest, that individual trip and bonding time. It was very special, and he gave that to them. The last bit of context needed before I get to the story is my dad's job. He worked for the highway department at the time, and that's not a very exciting job. His whole deal was, if they were going to widen a road, he would go to the property owners of where the road was and go, hey, we're expanding the road, we need to take up this much of your property, here's a suitcase full of money. That's basically his whole job. Not a very exciting one. But that does get us to why this story happened. See, my dad, there was one piece of property that he had to go to every couple of years because it was a very old road built in the 1800s. So property lines were very amorphous. No one really knew where the records were. No one really knew who owned what. So it took a lot of negotiating over several decades with this particular road. It was a road called Apple Street in central Louisiana. It was named Apple Street because there was an orchard where they grew apples there. And that's just how they named things in the 1800s. And the time of year that my dad went to Apple Street for these negotiations happened to coincide with the Apple Street Apple Festival. It is what it sounds like. At the end of the year, there's a big surplus of apples and they need to get rid of them, so they have a carnival. And there's, like, attractions and little stands, and it's a community effort, and it was a good time. And my dad went a couple times and realized a light bulb goes off in his head. Hold on, I'm gonna make like a family tradition out of this. I'm gonna bring my sons in order to this apple festival when they're like 8 or 9 years old, That way I get all 3. They get an individual road trip with me, bonding time, and a fun carnival. They get a shared experience that they can carry together and share in the rest of their lives. And I'm putting bread on the table. This is my job. That's a triple threat. That's A+ planning on the part of a dad right there. And so he puts it into action. My oldest brother, when he was around 8 or 9 years old, goes with my dad to this apple festival. And they come back, and my oldest brother is raving about how fun it was. Oh my God, I didn't know that many apples could exist in one place. A couple years later, my next brother goes. He's about 8 or 9 as well. He comes back, same thing. They had Fuji apples and Granny Smith and Red Delicious. Those were gross, but everything else was awesome. And it was crazy. The next one goes, same thing, all the time. And at this point, I have been born, and I grow up in a household constantly hearing how amazing Apple Street is. Because my oldest brother went before I was born. The closest to me, he was going around the time I was born. So for 8 years of my life, almost every year, like, oh, this is about the time Dad took me to Apple Street. I remember that. It was awesome, you know? And one day my dad goes, hey, do you want to go with me on... I was in the car already. I was a puff of smoke where I was standing. I was ready to go. I had literally been waiting my whole life for this festival. And Apple Street, like I said, was in central Louisiana. It's about 2 hours north of where we grew up. And fun fact about 2 hours. That is the perfect amount of time to hype the shit out of an 8-year-old before they pee themselves. And the whole ride, my dad was just saying stuff like, they've got candied apples. And I was like, oh, I love candy. I like apples. Let's put them together. See what we get, Because they have a bobbing for apple stand. I'm like, I can't even handle this. I love getting my hair wet. I'm 8 years old. That's my favorite thing in the world. And he goes, they've got a Ferris wheel shaped like an apple that is so tall you can practically see our house from the top. And I exploded. I was so ready to go. And I knew we were getting close because that's when we pulled off the interstate. And we took a few turns and we're suddenly going down this dirt road. And we take one last turn and there it is. I can see it right in front. I can see it clear as day right now. Right there is a wooden shack where they sell apples for $5 a bag. And that's it. That's all there was. There was no Ferris wheel. There wasn't even there wasn't candy. There wasn't even a bucket of water to put apples in. There was nothing there. And my dad just goes, oh man, I guess we missed it. And then we got in the car and left. That was the entire trip. And I was so confused. I was like, there was no fair. He didn't even do work. He didn't talk to a single person. We didn't even buy a bag of apples. They were right there. Why not? We made the trip. And I've Googled it since then. That was 20-something years ago. The internet's been around. I Googled it. If you Google Apple Street, Apple Festival, Louisiana, or some combination of those words, you get one result, and it says, do you mean the one in Okinawa, Japan? Because that doesn't exist. That is Apple Street, who are you? No, that's never happened. It never existed. It's never been a thing. That festival is a lie, a fabrication, completely made up from my dad's imagination. And I was so confused as to why he did this. Until on the car ride home, my dad sees me crying next to him, and he goes, oh, I bet you're pretty disappointed, huh? Yeah. Well, I bet you want your younger brother to feel the same way, don't you? Yeah. Well, then you know what to do. And we got home. And, oh my God, Apple Street was amazing! Oh my God, you would not believe how wet my hair was. completely made up. And we've told people this. Anyone who will listen, we've told our shared, not bonding experience, our shared trauma, really, about the lies that our father told us. Oh, hey, nice to meet you. My name's Evan. My dad's a fucking lunatic. You know that? And I was telling people this to everyone. And I started doing comedy a few years ago, and I started telling jokes. And then I told my dad one day over dinner, I was like, Dad, I am going to start telling the Apple Street story on stage. as part of my act, I'm going to expose your lies to the world so that people know what happened to me that basically forced me to become a stand-up comedian, you son of a bitch. And he just went, yeah. It's a shame you missed it though, huh? You fucking psychopath. Fucking psycho. 30 years! He never once admitted it. In 30 years that he made it up. He literally took that lie to the grave. And that is peak dad shit. I'm impressed. That is amazing. It is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. I have modeled my life after him. Holy shit. I've heard of dad jokes. No one else has ever taken one that far. A 30-year prank on your 5 sons that has traumatized them for life? Incredible. Impeccable. And just side note to prove how true this story is, after my dad died, I actually got this tattoo to commemorate him and that story. And I did that so because I want to remember him and I want to honor him because I will have kids one day. And 8 or 9 years after I have that kid, we're going on a road trip. And 2 hours after that, they're going to be crying. My name's Evan Rabelais. Thank you very much, guys. Have a night.